Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today I'm doing a 12 by 12 review of Cascadia from Flat Out Games. Cascadia is a game that I already know I love. If you watch previous coverage from me on it, you know that it's a game system that I enjoy, and it's a game system that has only gotten better with me over time. This is a 12 by 12 review. That's a format I have on the channel where I take a look at a game that I've played at least 12 times, usually more. In the case of Cascadia, it's probably like 40 times in at this point between solo and non-solo play. And additionally, that more importantly than the 12 times is the fact that I've played in every possible configuration, or every reasonable configuration I possibly can. So I'm going to be talking about the solo mode, I'm going to talk about the multiplayer, the multiple player counts and all that, as well as the different challenges they have. They have a challenge mode where you can throw in modifications and all that, and a system where you can kind of get little score point check marks as you go through it. Just a whole lot of ways to go through the game. Now, Cascadia, I'll give you a very high-level overview of how it plays, and then we'll just dive into general opinions and talking about how each thing affects my degree of opinion around the game and the play and all that. But starting off the bat, Cascadia is a system in which you're trying to get as many points as possible by building out your own private tableau. Players are going to be drafting tiles from a central marketplace over here, taking those tiles, adding the tableau, and adding the piece to that tableau as well. So you're taking new tiles, as well as new habitats, as well as new animals that will go onto your tiles, and the animals score in different ways depending on the cards you have in play. This is where there's a strong variety as far as you have different bears you can have in play. So there's like 5 different bear cards if you have the promo pack. There's going to be like 5 different bear cards you can utilize, each one giving you slight variation to how the bear scores. So this exact setup is a different game if I proxy out that card instead of the other card, and that variation is true for all of them. So you have 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 possible combinations, which is 5 times 5, 25, 125, 625, I think that sounds right. No, 500, 500, 2500. Is 5 squared? Is 5 to the power 5 2500? I think it is. That sounds about right. I don't know. Either way, if that's right, there's a whole lot of possible combinations as far as the different types of scoring mechanisms and puzzles you have in play here. On your turn, you're going to go ahead and select from this area, select a tile to go ahead and add. So for example, in this case, I want to go ahead and I love the birds. Birds are almost always my favorite. So I'm going to start trying to set up situations of bird scoring. I'm going to place this down over here like so, being mindful of trying to line up those terrains because there's extra points there. I'm going to take this bird over here and put it down over here. Maybe I should do it like this. I'm going to do it like this over here, put that bird over here, and that's going to give me an acorn because it exactly matches the only terrain. Whenever you have only one terrain type, the compensating factor is you can get your hands on an acorn if you match the, if you put down that bird there. We're going to put a new tile into play, we're going to grab a new thing from the bag, putting that out, and then we're going to have the next player going ahead and adding to build their tableau. That's the core sequence of play, and you're going to do that 20 times. You're going to grab 20 different tiles and 20 different animals and build out your grid, and then when you're done, and you'll see over here, different terrains over here, they have different possibilities. So for example, you can have either a fox or a bear on this terrain. So you have flexibility sometimes, other times you don't have flexibility, but again, that will reward you with these acorns that can be used to sweep this row, or to take a mismatched pair of those, or alternatively, are just worth a point at the end of the game. You're going to do that 20 times, slowly building out increasingly more, larger groupings of terrain, because you're scoring for 2 things in the game. Well, 3 things technically. You're going to score for the acorns. Let's take this and put this down over here. You're going to be scoring for the acorns in the game, but you're also going to be scoring for the fact that you're going to have the groupings of terrain. So every terrain type is going to score for its largest grouping. So for example, right now I already have 2 points of forest, 3 points of mountain, and only 1 point of this wheat desert area, sand, I don't know what it is, the hay, whatever that yellow one is called. I score 1 point for that because these two are not connected. But if I were to grab this and put this over here, then it would suddenly be worth 3 points because now they're suddenly connected. And then lastly, you're scoring for the animals themselves. Each of these animals scoring for different configurations. So I will walk you through these so you have an idea of how things play out, but I'm not going to walk you through every single possible card, but just so you have an idea of how it goes. This fox over here is scoring for pairs of animals around it. So for example, I ideally want to get a pair of foxes over here, which I could do if I go through this over here, and then from there I want to try to get animals paired up around it. So if I took this tile over here, I don't even know which one's a good one to take. Let's do this one over here, so I have that there, and let's pretend I have a bird on it. Then now already I have 2 birds around the foxes, and if I can get an elk over here, that's going to be another pairing around the foxes. So these foxes, these pairs of foxes, want other pairs of animals around it, and will score based on how many possible pairs there are, up to 11 points per pair of foxes. Over here in this particular map, the red-tailed hawks are going to score for non-adjacent hawks for every line of sight. So for example, I had this over here, that would be 3 points for that, and if we had another red-tailed hawk over here, one over here, then this area over here is now suddenly you have 1 line of sight, 2 line of sight, 3 line of sight, you get 9 points for those 3 hawks. The Chinook salmons are going to score for runs of salmons, and you get 1 point per salmon and 1 point for every animal adjacent to the run of salmon. So over here, you can see over here, as I create runs, you want to create a longer and longer run and get as many animals as possible around it. You can get lots of points if you do it right. The Roosevelt elk over here are going to score for those configurations, scores per elk pair in exact orientation. So you want these different pairs, and the more of those pairs you have, the more points you're going to get for that groupings. And over here, the grizzly bears are going to score 5 points for a 2-size shape, 3 points for an 8 points for a 3-size shape, and then 13 points for a 4-size shape in any combination, but they need to be surrounded by not bears. So you need small groupings of bears with no bears around them. You're going to take 20 different animal tiles. Those 20 tiles are going to 20 tiles as well as 20 animals from those. So you're going to start with your central grouping of 3, expand it outwards to a grouping of 23 areas with 20 tiles on them, and that's going to give you your specific scoring combination and puzzle in Cascadia. Now the solo mode is a little different. There's 2 ways of playing a solo. You can play the simply solo mode where you're simply trying to just beat your score, and the way that works is every single round after you take a tile, so you're going to have these animals over these tiles over here, you're going to have the animals, and whenever you take a tile, you're going to go ahead and take them and then remove the rightmost tile from there and then refill the display. So effectively you're operating as a 2-player game in terms of the number of tiles in play, but you're going to be sweeping a tile from the rightmost every single time as you go through it, and so you just need to take into account what you're leaving behind as you go through it. And then it's either a beat your score system, or alternatively they have goals and scenarios in them. So those goals and scenarios over here, let's show you these and then start diving into opinions. These over here, you have these achievements over here, which are going to give you different achievements you can go through as far as starting off, you're just trying to get a higher and higher score, but using specific pairings of animals in the solo mode. And then as you keep going, you're still always using specific pairings, but like maybe over here, for example, you need to get 90 points. 5 points from acorns, and you need to not have your bears touch any elks, and that's how you accomplish scenario 8. So it starts giving you not just points and not just combinations of animals, but specific things you're trying to achieve as you go through it. And that's going to be the solo mode. Let's start diving into opinions and reviews and talking about the various elements of the game. Cascadia-based game, before we even dive into solo, just Cascadia at 2, 3, and 4 players is a delightful experience. This is a game that has only grown over me time and time again as I continue to play it. It is on the lighter side. It is for sure a gateway game, but it's one of the best gateway games I have in my collection. Again, 40 plus plays deep, and I am not yet remotely bored of the combination of how I'm going to try to build out the most efficient scoring puzzle, aiming to break that 100 points, because you can break 100 points. It takes a little bit of work, but you can do so. But even getting in the range of 90 points is a decent score, especially when you're fighting with other players over what you want, and you're both vying for those Chinook salmon, trying to get a long run of them. You need to be mindful of what other players are doing, because they're going to be drafting tiles away from you. If you see someone building out a network of red-tailed hawks, it might be time to pivot away from that before you get stuck in a war of attrition with them and the other players get to take the tiles they want. This game works incredibly well at 2, at 3, and at 4 players. I find that all the player counts give me a very good experience. 4 players is arguably my least favorite, which is a common thing I'd say, because at that point you're adding a little bit of extra downtime and you're not really adding that much to the player dynamics. But again, it's a short enough, fast enough game that this is not. There are some times where I want to play a game specifically at 3 and not at 4. That's not the case with Cascadia. Cascadia operates great at 3 and at 4, and the combination of just simple depth of play that the game gives you. It gives you a lot of things to consider, but it gives you a compelling journey of building out your landscape. This is something you've seen in any number of different games, from Land vs. Sea to Carcassonne. It's fun to build out your terrains. It's fun to match up those edges, and you don't have to match up edges, but if you do so, you can get points for the largest groupings. And so it has that satisfying area of just building something out. It has the variable point scoring that gives you a puzzle to consider, and yet it's light enough and simple enough that it's not overwhelming. It can be very gateway friendly to new players, although just try not to be too cutthroat as far as how you play against newer players. But it can be gateway friendly while also being rewarding to experienced gamers. It's a very, very solid game that I cannot recommend this game enough. To me, it's a solid 5 out of 5 at what it's doing. It is just so accessible and accessible, easy to teach, easy to play, rewarding to play, works for different gamer types. Just a great game that I highly recommend. As far as the solo mode of Cascadia, because the solo mode introduces, well, the idea of, again, you playing it solo on its own, which I don't like at all. But in general, the plain solo mode, before you dive into the scenarios, the plain solo mode is a beat your own score solo mode, which has never been my jam. I don't like beat your own score in any solo game. To me, those are kind of systems that I play at once, and then I move on from it, because I'm not here to just try to see, can I finally get over 87? I don't care. I'm not trying to beat a score where I'm ranked as being good or very good or all that. That doesn't do it for me. Unfortunately, Flatout games in general and most of the designs, or at least the ones I've played so far, give you scenario-based goals to achieve. So it's not as simple as beating your score. Rather, there are 20 different solo scenarios, 20 scenarios to go through, 15 scenarios, I don't know why I said 20 so confidently. There are 15 scenarios to go through that each give you a different puzzle on them. Now, I will say the first 4 are kind of just beat your own score to a degree. There is a score threshold, so at least there's something in play. There's a number to beat as opposed to this is good, this is very good, and that's the best. So there is a threshold to beat, which I don't mind. I've gone through them them all. But to me, from 5 to 15 is where the system shines. I like having specific goals. I like that you give me this, I have to hit 85, but I have to at least get 3 foxes fully scored over there. So that gives you a different puzzle as far as how you engage with this. You know, you get 20 points. You have to get 20 points from birds. I love getting points from birds. That's my favorite one to go through. These achievement scenarios are just a lot of fun to go through, and to me, they really enhance the gameplay experience. I strongly encourage them. If you are anyone who's looking for any kind of solo puzzle, the line of games from Flat Out Games in general, but Cascadia in particular, well, I shouldn't say in particular. I think Calico's amazing. Cascadia, along with them, gives you a strong set of solo scenarios that is rewarding to go through, that does not devolve simply to beat your own score. So a strong solo mode once you dive into the achievements. Speaking of achievements, there's a whole achievement system in general where you have different things to go for in the game. You can have these achievements over here, which this whole section of different ways of trying to play a multiplayer game, but kind of with that same idea. So as you play through a multiplayer game, you have things like, you know, getting 110 points. So if you get 110 points, you get to mark off your thing, and then you get to go ahead and on this track, you get to mark that you've made progress on that track. And the achievement section over there is a lot of fun to go through it. And in fact, one house rule that I have when I play with achievements is you have to slowly tick off your own boxes as you go through it. So you have to tick off your own boxes of I've achieved this, I've achieved that, and that means as you continue to knock off achievements, it gets harder and harder for you to have a unique standout achievement, because once you've gotten 80 points, well, you have to get at least 85. Once you've gotten no bears, well, you can no longer win with no bears. Now you can win with no elk, no salmon, no hawks, no foxes. So as you accomplish achievements, you can only do one per game. I've made it so that you cannot win the game. You are ineligible from winning unless you've accomplished an achievement, and it almost operates like a bit of a catch-up mechanism for players who have played the game a lot more and know it better, and it kind of expires once you hit 25 plays, or 25 wins, I should say, because there's only 25 achievements. But the idea that a player who has played it more times might have like 15 achievements locked off. The next time I play, I do get majority for 3 habitats. That's great, but that's one less thing I could do next time, which means next time I have to try to get a different achievement, and it kind of leads to a fun little challenge that does compensate for different levels of skill. I like the achievement system, and I think it's a lot of fun. Again, it gives you that extra driving, something to check off, to mark your pathway, and to feel like you're accomplishing something cool as you play. This game will continue to be more challenging even as you dive into it, because you're trying and experimenting with new aspects of it. The area I didn't particularly care for is the rule restrictions. That's going to be an area down here which gives you different rule restrictions in the game, and they give you different rule restrictions for all the players, and again, you can go ahead and earn a check mark on your achievement pathway if you've done so. I find them mostly not that great. There's things like habitat scoring change. All habitat corridors of exactly 3 count for 3 points each. I didn't feel that gave me I felt that took away from the compellingness of the puzzle of the game. We have play with a display of only 3 pairs of tiles, so instead of having 4 pairs, you play with 3. Again, didn't really make the game more compelling, just gave an arbitrary restriction. We have 2 nature tokens that are required to take a nature action. Again, arbitrary restriction. For the most part, out of the 10 different rule restrictions they have, I think the only one that I've cared about, there's 2-ish. The first 2 are the ones that I kind of loosely care about. The first one is at least 1 habitat must match when placing tiles. So normally, matching habitat size is good for you, but not essential. So if you need to place this here because it's the right place to put it, go for it, by all means. But in this rule restriction, you cannot do so. You have to have at least 1 side matching at all times as you place tiles, and that gives you an additional way to think about the puzzle. It felt like a restriction that had meaning behind the decision and agency of it. The second restriction is almost the opposite. No matching habitats may touch when placing tiles. So you ignore habitat scoring entirely, which felt less fun, but you can't have them all match at all as you place, which felt kind of silly. So really just the first one from all of them. Literally, if you go through all 10 of these, I haven't played with all of them, but the ones I have played with, the only one I've liked is at least 1 habitat must match, and the others I've stopped playing with or engaging with because they either have proven to be unsatisfying or look like they would be unsatisfying. And so that's kind of what we have over here. We have multiple systems going on here. We have a basic game that is a great game. We have a solo mode that's okay, but that's because I don't like point scoring solo modes. We have a scenario-based solo mode, which I love and highly recommend. It's an absolute ton of fun. We have an achievement system that's going to give you things you have to achieve even in a multiplayer game, and I like that a lot. In fact, I've house ruled past the basic rules so that you can only win if you cross off a new achievement. You are otherwise ineligible for winning. It forces you to slightly reapproach how you examine the game, and I really enjoy that. And then lastly, there's rule restrictions of which there are 10, and I only really recommend 1. The other 9 do not feel particularly interesting in order to engage with the game. That's basically what we have for Cascadia. Cascadia is a great game. It has held up to over 40 plays. I don't even know the count. I'm just saying, I just know that I've done all the solo modes and I've lost several of them. So solo alone, I've probably played this like 25 times. And multiplayer as well. I've been playing this since I got it extensively, and it's one of my more common games that I break out. So if I had to guess, I'd guess somewhere between 40 to 50 plays under my belt of Cascadia. It is an excellent game that I highly recommend. It is my favorite games from Flat Out Games line of games. I believe there's an upcoming expansion as well, which will somewhat invalidate this 12 by 12 review because I'll have a new way to try to play and experience and enjoy the game, but I will 100% be doing so because it's just that good of a game. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this helpful. As always, I hope you have a good one.